Sheila here with Sirius Taurus Moon, Mars Hour, Jupiter Day. Let's talk about a certain trajectory. And this has to do with this Gemini presence of Uranus, Sedna, Sol, and Mercury with the ascendant in Gemini. Well, let's think about a story. Within a war, families and lineages that came from various countries, including immigration within the country, send their children to work at a corporation to acquire information, to acquire experience. The living conditions and the working conditions are not summoning up or are not compounding to actual livable life for the rest of the employees in the corporation that actually depend on the job for their income. These employees begin to have various diseases. They begin to have various body collapse, mental collapses, and essentially inability to continue on holding the workplace as the workplace becomes liability instead of leverage. Our workplace is supposed to be leverage. It's supposed to leverage to us our children's inheritance being ethically sourced, meaning not criminal, and supportive of our fifth vital sign and orgasmic birthing fertility. Otherwise, it is becoming a liability. And when a workplace is a liability, most of us will see it as various diseases that are growing, that are signaling us that this place will not sustain us, our lineage, or even our own well being, or even fertility. People, whether by simply being sick or by not being able to pay, either need to seek a better job or to emigrate out of these corporations. The people that are sent to basically spy on the workplace and acquire connections that are coming from lineages where they didn't financially need to work, they begin to see that had they been dependent on, for example, if they don't want to marry the person that their father or their mother want them to marry, if they don't want to continue the same line of business, let's say the business was some sort of unethical, and they very pragmatically don't want to take that risk, if the laws in the country change and tax evasion was not something that is so possible and easy, they see that they would need to depend on that work in that corporation, and that just like their peers, they would not be able to do so. Furthermore, they see that the many people they have saw and thought about as prostitutes, sex workers, escorts, people that went through a series of extreme abuse, and they can see it by the signals and symbols around them. The way that people don't care at all for issues of virtue or not virtue, sex before marriage or not. They care more about whether the sexuality is attuned with their yes, no, maybe, whether they are honored in intimacy, regardless of if this happens with a partner in marriage or in any other situation. They see that the people that pay attention to that are better at identifying issues regarding their own health, their own fifth vital sign, and they're better negotiators and better deal makers. So they also see that had they depended on this job and became sick and unable to work, being subjected to what people call the sex work industry will make their minerals not absorb, which would make them further sick, would grow cancer and have increased health spans that they could not cover from, let's say, being sex trafficked, that they will not be able to even drink or eat, or that they would be having eating disorders, needing a lot of food but not absorbing, And that's not gluttony, it's simply minerals not absorbed in the body due to rape. This creates the more, how should I say that? This creates an increased awareness that either the line of business or the business methods and networking of the previous generations, new money or old money, need an update. Some people will try to take it to the Machiavellian and try to, at all costs, depopulate, which would increase the friction and would cause people to see total humanity extinction as self-defense against a more gruesome death. The gaps between the higher class and the lower class begin to thin as more and more people understand that they could very easily be the lower class just because the type of crises that cause people to gain wealth occur, because the competition is immense even amongst elite. And that pertains to entire lineages in risk of being extinguished. Furthermore, they see that the medicine that is prescribed to people, um, that by those who are decision makers would be considered sheeple, is not exactly the medicine that they would want to depend on, and yet it is becoming more probable that to not be considered a forever haunted criminal against humanity, they need to take a different stand. The hunting of criminals against humanity is simply facilitated by the huge competition in many sectors and the aspiration of each lineage to acquire as much control over as fundamental sectors as possible. But how to enable human rights and structures that enable human rights without getting into yet another friction? One card that is on the table is total humanity extinction. As Pluto makes his closing sextile to Aries from the square to the sextile, it is becoming more evident that sense of self, which is violated, let's say, by rape, is a non-negotiable. And to violate the sense of self goes against the defense of, let's say, a lineage, a mansion, or even a president. It is becoming more and more evident that people who rape basically create negation of rational players, and to sustain some sort of peace, we need rational players. Extortion becomes insuffice in generating peace, and the card of being able to generate peace is what gives the legitimacy over the monopoly over power to regimes. Peace cannot be generated with people that have the friction of their own bodies in heated inflammation, neurodivergence that cannot be subdued by the neurotoxins that are the residues of the atomic bomb in various, whether it's Los Alamos or various projects, residues. Nor do people want that in their teeth. As a result of this entire situation, the knowledge about plants that purify the water, the confiscation of basically sunflower oil, sunflower seeds oil, the ecosystemic options for energy becomes prevalent and known, and people are very well aware that the house they could be building with Adobe is not really as costly as people want to portray it, and that the combination of medical assistance and free birthing support in the fifth vital sign and orgasmic birthing is absolutely possible in a world where the medical system is not infiltrated by rapey Epsteinis. And they require for both the technology that is actually supportive and the natural solutions that are actually viable. If in the past trying to take advantage over a person in a weak situation would have been considered the way of the world, now it's considered an assassination attempt that is okay to self-defend against, which is basically to kill a person that tries to take advantage of a person in a weakness, trying to traffic them or anything like that, is to kill a criminal against humanity, because if they had been successful, the person would lose their sense of self and would have become a risk and a threat to world peace, just at a time where people need the card of peace to generate legitimacy over the monopoly over power. Furthermore, earning models that rely on psyops and diversion tactics are no longer prevalent, because the continuum of that trajectory is targeting the clients. People begin to genuinely seek and consume content that is really worth the risk of watching. They require people to talk about the actual issues more and more, and that pertains also to entertainment industry, celebrity cultures, and influencers. It's not suffice to throw the name Epstein out there. People need to address the fact that it's the torture that turned people into criminals due to loss of sense of self, which creates susceptibility to mind control, and that is funded by the same classified project budget that is supposed to defend the civilians, whether it's civilian number one or each and every civilians, from the susceptibility to mind control, which causes debt, crime, and various risks of crimes against humanity and ecosystemic crimes. This creates an opportunity to the businesses that do not traffic, that do not rape. It's a blue ocean that only they can sustain, because only they will have both the safety of sending lineages that lost their wealth or that are trying to regain their wealth and emigrated from place to place, and have employees, children that are working there because simply is safer. And those working conditions also need to support the people that basically Gen Z friendly, which means having a meaning, having developing their own project, their own meaningful brand, and having their rights for their mind, for their creative patents preserved within the workplace. And the working conditions supporting orgasmic birthing, fifth vital sign, and the conditions of housing, laws, the ability to sustain a business, the ability to sustain a house need to be way more accessible. The card of entire humanity extinction in A bombs is on the table because people have gotten various crises that are very recent. The subprime was very recent. COVID was very recent. The current crisis is very recent. if it was a crisis in a century, people could say, oh, well, but these people were the ones that provided us food or provided us shelter. But when people experience several crises, they already see a trajectory. And they require for the ones that provide the solutions to not be the ones that created the problem. And to show how their solutions prevent the creation of a problem ever again. That is transferred from requesting that from, let's say, the patient or the homeless or the raped person to the system. Systems that failed to provide that are also being held accountable. Systems that blamed the raped for their own rape, the homeless for their homelessness, and so on and so forth, are basically exposing themselves as lineages of criminals against humanity and as compliant with crimes against humanity.